It's a simple question we've been asking. Has the sky changed? Has the sky changed so radically that this could be the most important question a scientist could ask? Important because for centuries we've projected our familiar sky onto the past. Call it the uniformity principle, as today so before. Caught in the wake of this sweeping misperception, we didn't hear the ancient messages. We paid no heed to remembered earth-altering catastrophes that transformed human consciousness globally. Our early ancestors the world over drew remarkably similar pictures of things never seen in our sky today. Incessantly, they reenacted celestial dramas, all with a desperate urge to remember, to maintain their connection to the gods of a former time. And yet we see only the magic, the superstition, and the absurdity of it all, ignoring the profound questions of cause and effect. Extraordinary planetary violence in a highly electrified environment was the cause, and the effect was an outpouring of myths and symbols. How could it happen that human beings whose lives depended on living close to nature could so clearly remember events if nothing actually occurred to provoke these remarkable memories? A golden mountain rising to the center of heaven, a cosmic ladder connecting the earth and the sky, a fire-breathing serpent or dragon threatening to destroy the world. The mystery arises from identical absurdities found on every habitable continent. Rising above all else was a pervasive fear. Could the greatest catastrophe, the prototype of doomsday, occur once more? As before, so again. Around the world, stargazers searched the sky for signs and symbols, for portents of the things they feared the most. This cultural response, punctuated by finger-pointing and scapegoating, drove ancient nations to see sacrifice and war as sacred obligations. It was this fear, this doomsday anxiety, that hung like a cloud over every culture for thousands of years. The archaic memories did indeed grow confused across the millennia, yet the ancient nightmares continue to haunt us, reawakening anxiety with every symbolic pointer to past events. When planets move into a conjunction, or a comet comes into view, or the zeros line up on a calendar, a collective dream of doomsday passed from generation to generation, all fed by memories never sufficiently understood in our own time. I hope you'll stay with us, and if you do, I can promise a new and radical perspective on the ancient experience, based entirely on the bedrock of fact, the sky above our early forebears, and its connection to ancient myths and symbols and magical practices, need not remain obscure to us. The subject of this video series is the ancient experience of towering celestial forms that are no longer present. Worldwide testimony points to planets extremely close to Earth and gathered in close congregation. We've called this gathering of planets the polar configuration because it was centered at the celestial pole around which the heavens visually turn. The huge sphere of Saturn filled the circumpolar sky. Close to the center of Saturn stood another body, the planet Venus, discharging electrically, the streamers of this discharge stretching upward across the face of Saturn. And seen in front of Venus was a smaller, darker, reddish sphere, the planet Mars. At a critical juncture, a crescent, cast by light from the sun, appeared on Saturn, rotating in an awe-inspiring cycle of day and night. That's because the axis of the Earth was aligned to that of the assembled bodies, causing the configuration to rotate visually above observers in the northern hemisphere, exploding into life at sunset, the beginning of the archaic day of the gods. Yes, the claims are outrageous, but also extraordinarily specific, leaving no doubt as to what the ancient evidence should look like, in stark contrast to all common opinion about the ancient past. From a single snapshot of the configuration seen here, we can work backwards to the first appearance of these bodies out of an undifferentiated cloud or sea of dusty plasma. We can follow the configuration's evolution through phases that range from quasi-stability to earth-shaking catastrophe. In these presentations, we'll suggest that all of the mythic and symbolic archetypes can be explained by the presence of these bodies, their electrical exchanges in a plasma medium, and their relative movements in relation to each other. Intense electric discharge formation stretched between the gathered bodies, transitioning from one form to another. First to emerge was the triangular or threefold discharge form of Venus, interpreted mythically as the name of the creator or three goddesses in one, a widely acknowledged archetype still unexplained. Here, three goddesses reveal the triangular form with their entwined fingers, but the variations on the ancient theme are almost endless, and the initial three-faced form is inseparable from the identity of Venus as the emerging, radiant, great star. The ancient astronomies name the components of this dynamic configuration as planets, different sizes and colors, and changing relationships to each other. The shock comes from seeing the described events in the demanding terms of three-dimensional perspective, where relative movements of the bodies dramatically alter the visual appearance of the configuration. No room for arbitrary explanations. With the later displacement from its polar position, the configuration was seen well into the southern hemisphere. Electric discharge forms metamorphosed violently above human witnesses, providing us with a stunning comparison to plasma instabilities seen in laboratory experiments. Our message comes down to one overriding conclusion. Things anciently remembered bear no similarity to the commonly accepted picture of the ancient sky. In a former time, our world was indeed a much different place. Of all the mistaken perceptions about the origins of ancient myths and symbols, it's the creation story that we've most profoundly misunderstood. The popular assumption is that the creation myths are simply wild guesses about the beginning of the universe, how the sun and moon appeared, the stars, distant planets, and a landscape inhabited by multitudes of living creatures, all leading to a culminating appearance of our primal ancestors. In truth, the creation tales describe a visible, metamorphosing formation in the sky. But the events could only be remembered through imaginative human interpretations, and over time, imagination itself would progressively obscure the original experience. Nevertheless, the sweeping impact of creation accounts on cultural history could hardly be overstated, since every ancient temple, every city, every kingdom was founded as a reenactment of the original creation story. As we bring the mythic content into a comparative study, the underlying patterns will stand out. First, the cloud of undifferentiated chaos. Then the emergence or clarification of a vast sphere called heaven when heaven was close to the earth. Then the differentiation of male and female aspects in conjunction as a central eye, heart, or soul, the primeval seed of creation. The archetypal Venus goddess was seen as the eye, but much more as well. And by this interpretation, the Martian warrior figure was the pupil of the eye. Many variations on the creation theme connect the central eye with an emerging triangular form interpreted as the visible name of the Creator himself. Then, erupting from the triangular form, a heaven-shattering explosion, remembered as the terrifying glory, a visible, reverberating shout announcing the active phases of creation. The symbols of this violent discharge converge globally, always conveying the idea of radiating fire and light, producing a sea of luminous ejecta, the primeval matter or raw material of creation. The explosive outflow gave the appearance of protection around an invulnerable spot, the location of the warrior god, the celestial prototype of the warrior king on earth. The symbolism is universal and found its broadest expression in the radiant crown of kings. The crown signified the primeval glory, the centerpiece of creation mythology. And for the same reason it meant the conjunction or marriage of the king and the goddess. Such was the original character of the mother goddess as great star, the radiant dwelling, protectress, and crown of the warrior god. We'll follow the creation symbolism up to and through the unraveling of the planetary configuration into the complex phases of restabilization, cosmic renewal, and the departure of the gods. The events were not just seen and heard, but encoded the world over in magical practices, in kingship rites, in New Year's festivals, and yes, even in ritual sacrifice and the great wars of conquest and nationalistic expansion. But what was the role of the overarching creator figure in all of this? The paradox of a mythic creator and displaced god will be the subject of our next discourse, When Saturn Ruled the World.